Gather round, it's Tale time. Classics. Hello, and welcome to Tale Time Classics with Charles Scrivens. I'm your host, Charles Scrivens. Today's tale is one of the best-known fairy tales ever told, and deservedly so. You may want to grab a little snack to go with this one, as Hansel and Gretel is all about hunger. You'll just need some breadcrumbs and maybe some cheese to go with them, and an apple. Actually, why not round it all out and throw in a giant gingerbread house? And remember, if you can see the gingerbread, there's not enough candy on your house. Ready? Let's get into it. Hansel and Gretel, edited by Charles Scrivens. On the edge of the forest, a woodcutter lived with his wife and his 2 children, Hansel and Gretel. The woodcutter never made much more than what was needed to get by, so there were no stores to help when hard times finally came. One evening, after the children were put to bed, the woodcutter shared his despair with his wife. "What are we to do? No matter how hard I work, no one will trade me enough food for the 4 of us in this famine. We shall all surely starve. Tomorrow, all 4 of us should go into the woods to gather wood," his wife responded. "At the end of the day, we should come back alone, without your children." "What?" the horrified woodcutter responded. "What chance do they have to survive out there? The beasts will have them for a meal." "In all likelihood, yes. But what choice is there? Easier to feed 2 mouths and some beasts than 4 mouths here." The 2 argued for quite some time. As sick as the conversation made the woodcutter feel, he struggled to defend his position to his wife. Now, admittedly, I've never had such a conversation, but I feel like it shouldn't be so hard to defend the position of, let's not leave the kids to die. I can't think of a better put your foot down moment. What's she gonna say? It's me or the kids? You know what? I'm gonna go with the kids. And then I only have 3 mouths to feed instead of 4. That's probably the best option even if she doesn't have a me or the kids ultimatum. Because you can't ditch somebody too soon after they suggest leaving the kids to die. Now, you might wonder, who's gonna look after the kids and make the meals and keep the house? Well, anyone would be better than the person who is out to kill them, and surely leaving the kids unattended in the house is better than in the forest. And it doesn't sound like she was making many meals anyways. It may be no simple thing to replace a stay-at-home mom, but if your occupation is being a stay-at-home mom and you try and kill the kids, you're bad at your job. Really, I don't see how you can get worse. He failed to come up with a plan of his own to feed all of the family. Eventually, he gave in to his persistent wife, hoping he would think of a revelatory idea the next day. Gretel, who had been restless sensing her father's struggles, had been awake and overheard the whole conversation. In a panic, she woke up her brother Hansel. She explained what she had heard to Hansel and asked him, "What are we to do?" Hansel, thinking as hard as he could, went to the window and looked out. "Aha!" he cried. "See those rocks glowing in the moonlight? With those, we can leave a trail to make sure we find our way home." Hansel snuck outside and collected as many of the glowing pebbles as his pockets could hold. The next morning, the woodcutter's wife jarred her stepchildren from their sleep and announced that they would all be going into the forest to collect wood. She gave each a small piece of bread and said, "That is all you will get for lunch, so don't go losing it." Hansel, whose pockets were stuffed with pebbles, gave his bread to Gretel, who safely stowed both pieces in her apron. The family started into the forest right away, with the woodcutter's wife setting a brisk, eager pace. Hansel lagged behind, often pausing and looking back at their little house. After a few instances of this, the woodcutter said, "Hansel, my boy, what is it that is taking your attention? You cannot be tired yet. We have not even left the site of our house. Keep up." "It is just that I have made friends with a white cat, father. He is waving to me from our roof." Now, even his stepmother looked back and said, "You dullard! That is no cat. It is naught but the glare of the rising sun on the chimney." Hansel had not been looking at any cat, however, but instead was taking pebbles from his pocket and dropping them onto the road. Once the family was deep into the forest, the woodcutter addressed his children. "Gather some sticks so that I may start you a fire. Then you can rest and be warm." With Hansel and Gretel resting by the fire, the woodcutter and his wife disappeared into the woods. The children believed they could hear their father cutting wood, so they were relaxed. Around lunchtime, they ate their little pieces of bread. The warmth of the fire, along with lunch in their bellies, caused the children, still tired from waking up early as well as the long hike, to doze off. When the children woke up, the sun was already setting. They still heard the sound from before, but now realized it was actually the wind flowing through old, rotten trees. "They really have abandoned us," Gretel cried. "What are we to do now?" "Do not worry," Hansel said. "The sky is clear, and the moon will soon show us the way home." No sooner had Hansel said this than the moon's glow descended through the trees to the floor of the forest. Hansel's pebbles caught the moon's glow, shining for the children to see. The brother and sister slowly made their way back to their home, being careful not to lose the trail. It took the whole night, but as the sun began to rise and the pebbles' shine faded, their little house was in sight. The exhausted children knocked on the door, which was answered by their stepmother. If she was surprised to see them, she hid it well. "Where have you been? And I see you've not brought any wood back with you either. You have been lounging about instead of working."
She may be terrible and mean, but she's also kind of right. They not only spent the whole day in the forest, but the whole night too, and they didn't bring back a single piece of wood? Don't they at least care about their dad? Well, he did leave them to die too, but bringing back some wood would have at least helped delay starvation, right? I don't have high hopes for their future as woodcutters.
The woodcutter, however, was ecstatic to see his children. He gave his children a big hug and said, "I was so worried. Fate in her goodness watched over you and guided you back, though. How I am grateful." But the hard times did not pass, and the little family's situation grew even more dire. "The cupboards are empty. We have already started our last loaf of bread," the woodcutter's wife told the woodcutter one night. "We should take the children into the woods again, only much further this time in order to be sure they do not return." "How can you think to try that again? Fate brought them back. Is that not proof enough that they are meant to be here?" "Then let fate bring them back again, this time with bread and cheese and apples and all the food they can carry. Otherwise they are destined to starve wherever they may be." The woodcutter and his wife argued once again, but she listened to nothing he said. The woman claimed that if he had no new solutions to their problems, then he could not change his position. So, as he had relented the first time, he did so again. The children, now wary of late-night conversations, were still awake and heard all. Once the adults had gone to bed, Hansel went to the door to leave and collect glowing pebbles as he had previously. However, this time the door did not open. They were trapped inside of their room, as their stepmother had locked the door before going to sleep. With nothing to be done, the children decided to get some rest, so at least they would have their wits about them come morning. The woodcutter's wife woke the children quite early. "Get up! It is time to earn your keep. We are going back into the woods, and this time you had better work hard gathering wood rather than lazing about the forest." Each child received a piece of bread, even smaller than the last time. Once Hansel had placed his bread in his pocket, he proceeded to crumble it into many little chunks in his hand. After the party had left, it was not long before Hansel stopped and turned to look back at their little house. "Hansel, you must keep up," his father said. "What is it that distracts you so?" "I cannot go without saying goodbye to my little white pigeon on the roof, who wishes us well," Hansel explained. "Fool!" the impatient woodcutter's wife cried. "You waste all our time, and there's not even a pigeon to be seen. Just the rising sun's glare on the chimney." Hansel had taken the opportunity to leave a breadcrumb on the path. As the family went deeper and deeper into the forest, Hansel threw his lunch away piece by piece to mark their trail. Once they had gone far beyond any place the children had been in their lives and might recognize, they finally stopped, just as Hansel's lunch was completely gone.
Look, we have to give Hansel credit for the whole stone plan, but apparently he's terrible at plan Bs. So when you get right down to it, our whole problem is that we don't have enough food, right? Okay, so what if I take all of my food and, get this, throw it on the ground? Yeah, I know. I'll know just how to get home because I'll be so hungry that I'll be able to sniff out the bread like a hound dog. Brilliant, right?
The The woodcutter built a fire for the children. As he and his wife turned to leave, the woman said, "We are going to chop and gather wood. Rest now and take your lunch so you will have energy enough to collect wood afterwards." Gretel did not want to let her parents leave her sight, but the children were very tired and hungry from the long hike. They would not be able to keep up with the adults and would be lost for sure. Gretel split her little piece of bread with Hansel. In spite of her worries, Gretel found it hard to keep her eyes open and, along with Hansel, fell fast asleep. When Hansel and Gretel awoke, the sun had already fallen, leaving the sky black. "Fear not, Gretel," said Hansel. "The moon will provide enough light to reveal my crumbs and lead us home." But the crumbs were long gone. Not a single speck of bread had gone unnoticed by the many birds of the forest, happy for an easy snack. Hansel was undeterred by their inability to find any of his bread. "I left many crumbs, so even if we miss one or two, there will always be another to keep us on track. We will soon find our way home." The children walked the whole night through the forest with the light of dawn bringing no familiar sights to help guide their way. Continuing on all that day, they not only failed to find their home, but any edge of the forest at all. Eventually, the children's legs reached their limit, and they had to sleep by a small stream. The night's rest did them little good, and they weakly went onwards. That morning, the two children did not go far before hearing a pleasing song from a bird. The pair stopped to listen and, looking up, saw it was an exotic bird of every color in the rainbow, unlike any they had ever seen. The two waited quietly until the bird finished its song. Its song finished, the bird spread its colorful wings and took flight. "Let us follow that bird," Hansel said. "I do not think it is from this forest, and we have no other direction to follow." Gretel agreed, and the decision quickly led the pair to a clearing with a small house. A sweet smell met Hansel and Gretel, bringing their severe hunger back to the front of their minds. As they approached the house, they saw it was no ordinary house. The walls were made of gingerbread, and the windows pure sheets of sugar. It was adorned with giant candy canes and gumdrops and icing and more. In their hunger, the children did not even bother knocking on the candy-coated door, but started gnawing away at the delicious house.
Why would they knock, though? To say, "Hey, I'm starving to death, so I'm going to eat your house if that's cool with you." If you build your house out of candy, I feel like that's an open invitation. If you don't want me to eat it, then you'd better cover it in plastic wrap or something. Otherwise, it'll get stale. Nobody wants that. You either need to show me you're saving it for later, or I'm having it now. Frankly, the owner is lucky to only have 2 little children eating it. Just try putting a gingerbread house outside. It will be covered in ants in no time. That's the main reason I don't live in a gingerbread house. That and I don't want to have to rebuild my house every couple of weeks because I've eaten it.
The children's consumption of the house did not go unnoticed. A voice from inside soon called, "Critch, cratch, crunch, who's having my house for lunch?" Hansel and Gretel paused to answer, the wind, 'tis not but the wind." The children went back to their eating even more voraciously, breaking large chunks away from the house. However, they were soon interrupted again as the door opened and a cloaked old woman appeared in the doorway. "Oh my, you poor children must be starved. But you need more than sweets to make a meal. Come inside where I have smoked meats, fresh eggs, wheels of cheese, and more." Not content with just sweets, Hansel and Gretel accepted the invitation inside. A feast, just as described, covered a grand table in the dining room. Hansel and Gretel dug in without delay. Not only was the meal the largest that the children had ever eaten or even seen, but it was the best tasting as well. Everything was cooked to perfection as though it all had just been placed on the table for their arrival. Once the children had finally had their fill, fatigue hit them once again. The old woman showed them to a little room with 2 soft beds which sent them to pleasant dreams almost immediately. But the dream was cut short, for the old woman was not as kind as she pretended, nor was Hansel and Gretel's discovery of her little house dumb luck, nor was the feast being ready just as they arrived a coincidence. The old woman was in fact a witch, who lured the children there and prepared the feast just for them. Had either Hansel or Gretel looked properly at their host, they would have seen the witch's red eyes and known the danger before them. Hansel and Gretel were not the first children to fall for the witch's tricks. Though the witch's eyes were so weak that she was nearly blind, her incredible sense of smell alerted her to children passing nearby and gave her plenty of time to prepare. She lured children to her house for the sole purpose of cooking and eating them, for though she had plenty of food delicious to a human, none of it could satisfy her compared to a human child. Such was the fate the witch had in mind for the sleeping Hansel as she lifted him from bed. She carried him to an empty stable and locked him in it. The witch returned to Gretel and shook her awake.
"Get up, there's work to be done. Your brother is nearly starved. He must be fanned up so that I can eat him."
This seems like a pretty clear mistake by the witch. Don't explain your plan to Gretel. Just say, "Dear me, your brother is so thin. We need to fatten him up." Maybe that wording is a little suspicious, but it's certainly better than straight up telling Gretel you're planning to eat her brother. Because then Gretel tells Hansel, and that's just the kind of thing that can ruin an appetite. It really takes some work to take a starving person and make them not want to eat. On the other hand, if the witch is probably going to eat me anyways, what the heck, bon appetit.
Gretel wailed at this news and struggled against the witch. But Gretel could do nothing against the witch, who threatened worse fates for Hansel than being well-fed and happy before being eaten, and was forced to obey. The witch cooked all manner of delectable dishes for Hansel, who ate it all. Gretel was given nothing. She was left with Hansel's scraps chewing on chicken bones as she cleared and cleaned the dishware. After some days, the witch went to Hansel's pen and said, "Give me your finger so that I may feel how you are progressing." Hansel thought to take advantage of the witch's poor sight and took a small bone from the floor of the pen into his hand. Instead of offering his finger, Hansel held out the bone to the witch.
"What's this? You're not coming along at all," the witch cried in dismay. "But that will change. I'll have you eating from dawn till dusk."
Food was brought to Hansel non-stop. Gretel, working harder than ever, still only got meager scraps as Hansel was forced to eat everything. The witch continued to monitor Hansel's progress, but Hansel offered the bone rather than his finger every time. Hansel's apparent lack of progress angered the witch, and eventually she lost her patience.
"I have waited long enough," she said to Gretel. "Tomorrow I feast on your brother regardless of his state."
Gretel fretted over this news, though she was exhausted from the hard work forced upon her. Sleep did not come to her that night. First thing in the morning, the witch lit the oven.
"Gretel, crawl inside and make sure the fire is caught and it is warming."
Alright kids, pro tip, never crawl into an oven. You may think that's obvious. You've probably got your fancy newfangled oven where you don't have to crawl into it to see if it's on. Admittedly, a better designed oven. But have you considered all of the situations? What if you need to clean the back wall of the oven? Sure, you can get most stuff to just burn off, but this mess won't go and it's a problem. Are you going to just make sure the oven is off and crawl in to clean it? No. Remember, never crawl into an oven. I can't stress this enough. If your oven is dirty and won't clean itself, there's only one logical thing to do. Buy a new oven.
Gretel paused and replied, "I do not know how. I have never done such a thing." This irritated the witch. She planned to shut Gretel inside and cook her as well because the witch did not believe Hansel alone would be enough to make a satisfying meal, as she thought him to be bone thin.
"It could not be simpler. With an oven as big as this, even I could do it."
The witch bent down into the door of the oven to demonstrate what Gretel should do. Gretel shoved the witch from behind, quickly shutting and locking the oven door once the witch was all the way inside. Gretel ran to Hansel's stable and freed him. "The witch will trouble us no more. Let us be rid of this place, brother." Before leaving, the pair searched for anything that might be useful in escaping the forest. Each grabbed a sack, which they filled with food. Upon entering the witch's bedroom, which neither child had ever seen, they discovered chests of jewels and gold.
What's the witch doing with jewels and gold? The appeal of both is that they look nice, and if the witch's eyesight is so bad, it seems like a waste. Now, of course, there are fully blind people who dress to impress, but who's the witch got to impress? She lives in the middle of nowhere in the forest. Even if I came across her place, I'd be just like the kids, too enamored by her awesome house to notice any jewelry she may be wearing. It just goes to show, ladies, you spend too much time worrying about your outfits and accessories and not enough time building giant candy-covered houses.
The children stuffed their pockets, but could not take it all, for it was too heavy. Then Hansel and Gretel ventured back into the woods to look for home. Not long after leaving the witch's cakey cabin, Hansel and Gretel came to a river that, though small, was too great for the children to cross safely. Hansel looked up and down the river.
"There's no bridge in sight. There is no way to the other side."
"Look there, though. Perhaps that little white duck will help us across," Gretel called to the duck.
Little duck, we are down on our luck. We wish to go home, but now we are stuck. Will you give us a ride across on your back, and point us onwards to keep us on track?"
The duck came to the shore where Hansel climbed upon its back. Hansel told his sister to sit beside him and join him.
"No," Gretel replied. "We should go one at a time. One of us is heavy enough already for the little duck. Go, little duck, and I shall wait for you here."
Gretel may have called over the duck, but she's like, "You go first, Hansel. I'll just see how it goes." Hansel must be out of his mind to try and get two kids with pockets stuffed with gold onto one little duck. I would expect the duck to struggle with one kid without any gold weighing him down. I would have been like, little duck, do you know of any larger waterfowl in the area? Like maybe a swan, or actually it doesn't even need to be a bird. How about a horse? A horse would be great even after we got across. Any horses nearby? No? All right. Which way the nearest crossing?
Just as Gretel instructed, the good little duck took Hansel, then Gretel, safely to the other side. Gretel thanked the duck, which quacked, then flew away over the trees.
"Let us follow that duck,"
Hansel said. Gretel agreed, and soon the forest began to look more familiar to them. The pair began to travel faster until, at last, their little house came into view. Hansel and Gretel broke into a run. They burst through the door and into their father's arms. He wept with joy, rather than sorrow and guilt, as he had every day since leaving his children in the forest. Their stepmother was nowhere to be found, for she had grown weak with hunger, caught a fever, and died. Hansel and Gretel emptied their sacks, revealing bread and cheese and apples and more food to their amazed father. Then they emptied their pockets of the jewels and gold. The hard times were finally over, so the little family lived happily from then onwards.
You know, it's rare to see a brother and sister get along so well. Nothing like a little starvation, abandonment, imprisonment, and forced labor to bring a family together. And really, I think we can all agree, the key to a happy family life is to completely ignore the fact that Dad went along with the plan to abandon the kids forever.